Hi, in this video, I will introduce you to the nervous system. Specifically, I will cover structure and function of the nerve cells and glial cells. Based on anatomy, nervous system can be divided into two major areas, central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system is composed of brain and spinal cord, whereas peripheral nervous system is composed of nervous tissue outside of the central nervous system, which includes cranial and spinal nerves. Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system is composed of nervous tissue. And nervous tissue is composed of two basic cell types, neurons, also known as nerve cells, and neuroglia, also known as glial cells. Neuron, just like other cells, is made up of cell body, also known as soma. Within the cell body, you will find cytoplasm and cellular organelles such as nucleus. The cell body has extensions referred to as processes. One type of processes are called dendrites. Dendrites are highly branched and are responsible for receiving most of the electrical signal information from other cells. Another type of process is called an axon. Many axons, but not all, are wrapped by an insulating substance called myelin. Spaces between myelin are called node of Ranvier. And together with myelin, node of Ranvier allows for proper and fast conduction of electrical signal along the axon. This signal reaches the end of axon called axon terminal, where there are several branches extending towards target cell. Each axon terminal ends with an enlargement called synaptic end bulb. Neurons use chemical synapse in order to communicate with other cells of the body, but the explanation on how signal is generated and how signal transduction occurs along the nerve cell is explained in a separate video. Since cell bodies and axons of the neurons are present in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, their names vary according to their location. For example, collection of cell bodies in the central nervous system is referred to as nucleus, whereas collection of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system is referred to as ganglion. A bundle of axons in the central nervous system is called tract, whereas bundle of axons in the peripheral nervous system is called a nerve. An example of this is the axon that projects from the retina of the eye into the brain. Axons that leave the eye, part of the peripheral nervous system, are called optic nerves. And when they are inside of cranium, part of the central nervous system, they are referred to as optic tracts. Neurons can be classified by many different criteria. One way to classify them is by the number of processes attached to the cell body. Unipolar neurons have one process emerging from the cell body. True unipolar neurons are only found in invertebrates, so the ones in humans are more appropriately called pseudo-unipolar neurons. Pseudo-unipolar neurons do not have separate dendrites. Instead, there is an axon emerging from the cell body that splits into two axonal branches, one running into the periphery with dendritic processes at the end, while the other running into the spinal cord with presynaptic terminals. Sensory neurons in your skin are examples of unipolar neurons. Bipolar neurons have two processes emerging from the cell body. Each extends from the opposite end of the cell body. One is the dendrite, and the other one is the axon with presynaptic terminals. Bipolar neurons are found in the olfactory epithelium. Multipolar neurons have one axon with presynaptic terminals and multiple dendrites. Multipolar neurons are all of the neurons that are not unipolar or bipolar. Neurons can also be classified on the basis of what they do. Sensory neuron also known as afferent neuron, functions to transmit sensory information from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. In other words, sensory neuron transmits information about changes that occur in the external or internal environment of the body. For example, you put your hand under running water to check the temperature. Dendrites of sensory neurons located in the skin of your hand will initiate transmission of information about water temperature towards central nervous system, specifically towards the spinal cord, where the sensory neuron meets different type of neuron called interneuron. Interneuron, also called association neuron, functions to process information received from the sensory neuron about water temperature in order to generate appropriate response. This response is then passed along motor neuron. Motor neuron, also called efferent neuron, functions to transmit motor information from central nervous system the peripheral nervous system. In other words, it transmits response generated by central nervous system towards the target cell. For example, depending on the sensory information about water temperature, the motor information might trigger skeletal muscles of the hand to move it away from the water if the temperature is too hot. Now let's look at glial cells, which are another type of cells found in the nervous tissue aside from neurons. Glial cells are classified based on their location in the nervous system as well as their function, although collectively we say that glial cells support neurons in many different ways. Glial cells in central nervous system include astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, and ependymal cells. Glial cells in the peripheral nervous system include satellite cells and Schwann cells. Astrocyte is the first example of glial cell located in the central nervous system. Due to multiple processes coming from the cell body, it looks like a star. Processes coming from the cell body of astrocyte interact with connective tissue of the central nervous system as well as neurons. Their function is to contribute to the blood-brain barrier and to support neurons by removing excess signaling molecules. For example, astrocyte contributes to the internal balance of potassium ion, which is important for proper nerve function. Second example of glial cells in central nervous system is the oligodendrocyte. Oligodendrocyte has few processes that extend from the cell body to create multiple myelin sheets on the same axon or different ones. So single oligodendrocyte is not restricted to a single neuron to make myelin. Third example of glial cells in central nervous system is microglia. As the name implies, micro meaning small, microglial cells are smaller than most of the other ones. It is suggested that these cells originate as white blood cells called macrophages and become part of central nervous system during their development. Therefore, their function is related to what macrophages do. Particularly, they encounter damaged or sick cells, engulf and digest them. They also engulf and digest pathogens such as bacteria. Fourth example of glial cell in the central nervous system is the ependymal cell, and it filters blood to make cerebrospinal fluid. Now let's take a look at two glial cells found in the peripheral nervous system. First example of glial cell in the peripheral nervous system is the satellite cell. Satellite cells surround cell bodies of neurons and provide support performing similar functions in the periphery as astrocytes do in the central nervous system, except for establishing the brain-blood barrier. Second example of glial cell in the peripheral nervous system is the Schwann cell. which insulate axons with myelin in different way from oligodendrocytes. Schwann cells wrap around a portion of one axon segment, creating individual myelin segment. As seen on the image, Schwann cell wraps around the axon several times to create myelin sheath. Little to no cytoplasm is found in between the layers of plasma membrane, except for the outermost layer, which contains cytoplasm and organelles such as nucleus. Several diseases can occur from the demyelination of the axons. The causes can be genetic or due to pathogens. Multiple sclerosis is an example of an autoimmune disease where antibodies produced by an affected person target myelin for destruction, compromising control of musculature. This is the end of my presentation about neurons and neuroglia. Please subscribe if you find my videos helpful and educational.